Hi, this is Lee from the Law School Toolbox and the Bar Exam Toolbox. Welcome back to Substantive Spotlight, where we're continuing our tour through the world of torts. Today we're diving into intentional torts, the original wrongs in our legal system that date back centuries. Think of these as the deliberate actions that make you go, "Oh no, you didn't." Unlike negligence, where someone accidentally causes harm, intentional torts involve, intent. What's fascinating about intentional torts is their directness. There's something almost primal about them. Hit someone? Well, that's battery. Threaten to hit them? That's assault. Take their stuff? Conversion or trespass to chattels. These concepts are so fundamental to our legal system that they formed the backbone of early common law. Today, we're going to synthesize the key concepts from our Listen and Learn series, and I'll give you strategies to tackle these issues on an exam. So buckle up, we're about to get intentional. Let's start with the person-based intentional torts. These involve harm or threatened harm to an individual's physical being or emotional well-being. The big three here are battery, assault, and false imprisonment. Battery is the intentional infliction of a harmful or offensive bodily contact. This has two key elements. 1, intent to cause contact or knowledge to a substantial certainty that contact will occur. And 2, harmful or offensive contact actually occurs. Remember, intent doesn't necessarily mean you intended to harm someone. It just means you intended the contact. If I playfully push you into a pool, not knowing you can't swim, that's still battery. I intended the contact even if I didn't intend the drowning risk. And contact doesn't have to be direct. It can be through an object or even something connected to the person. Pulling a chair out from under someone about to sit, battery. Grabbing someone's purse while they're holding it, battery through an object connected to them. As long as the contact was intentional and either harmful or offensive, you've got a battery. Next up is assault, the intentional infliction of a reasonable apprehension of an imminent harmful or offensive bodily contact. Notice how similar this is to battery, except no contact actually occurs. Instead, the harm is the fear or apprehension of contact. A classic example that we discussed in our Listen and Learn episode, waving a knife at someone who sees it and fears being cut. The victim didn't get cut, so no battery, but they reasonably feared it, which is assault. One critical detail, words alone aren't enough for assault. I'm going to hit you tomorrow isn't assault. I'm going to hit you right now while raising your fist definitely could be. Then there's false imprisonment, the intentional confinement of another person within fixed boundaries without lawful privilege or the person's consent. As we covered in our recent Listen and Learn episode, this requires 1, an intent to confine, 2, actual confinement within fixed boundaries, and 3, the person is either aware of the confinement or is harmed by it. False imprisonment doesn't require locked doors or physical restraints. Threats or even implied threats can be enough. If a store security guard tells a suspected shoplifter, "You can't leave until you empty your pockets," that might constitute false imprisonment. But store owners aren't completely defenseless. They have the shopkeeper's privilege, which allows for reasonable detention to investigate suspected shoplifting. The key word is reasonable, both in grounds for suspicion and duration of detention. Holding someone for hours over a suspected candy bar theft? Not reasonable. A brief questioning with legitimate suspicion? Probably protected. Let's pivot to property-based intentional torts. These involve interference with someone's land or personal property. The main three are trespass to land, trespass to chattels, and conversion. Trespass to land occurs when someone intentionally enters or remains on another's land without permission. As we have explored in our episodes, the key elements are 1, intent to be on the land, not necessarily to trespass. 2, physical entry, remaining or causing an object to enter the land. Remember, damage to the land isn't required. Simply stepping foot on someone's property without permission can be trespass. And there's no de minimis exception. Even momentary intrusions count. Now, what about personal property? That's covered by trespass to chattels and conversion. As we explained in a Listen and Learn episode, think of these as siblings. They both involve interference with personal property, but they differ in degree. Trespass to chattels is the intentional interference with another's personal property that causes minor damage or deprivation. Conversion is essentially the same but involves substantial interference. The different matters for remedies. Trespass to chattels gets you compensation for the damage, while conversion gets you the full value of the item. Borrowing your roommate's laptop without permission and returning it with a broken key, trespass to chattels. Taking that same laptop and selling it on eBay, well, that's conversion. Now let's talk about a particularly interesting intentional tort, defamation, which we covered in an early Listen and Learn episode. Defamation is a false statement of fact about the plaintiff that is communicated to a third party and causes harm to the plaintiff's reputation. The elements here are 1, a false statement of fact, not opinion, 2, about the plaintiff, 3, publication to a third party, 4, fault, negligence for private figures, actual malice for public figures, and 5, damages, unless the statement is defamatory per se. Defamation comes in 2 flavors, libel, which is written defamation, and slander, which is spoken defamation. Remember that truth is an absolute defense to defamation. If you say something true, no matter how harmful to someone's reputation, it's not defamatory. Another critical distinction. Public figures have a higher burden in defamation cases. They must prove actual malice, meaning the statement was made with knowledge of its falsity, or reckless disregard for the truth. That is why it's so hard for celebrities to win defamation cases. What about defenses to intentional torts? The most common are consent, self-defense, defense of others, and necessity. Consent can be express or implied. If you sign up for a boxing match, you've expressly consented to being punched within the rules of the sport. If you stand in line at a crowded concert, you've implicitly consented to reasonable jostling. Self-defense allows reasonable force to protect yourself from imminent harm. The key is proportionality. You can't use deadly force unless you reasonably fear deadly harm. And remember, once the threat ends, so does your right to self-defense. Necessity comes in 2 forms, private and public. Private necessity, which is protecting yourself or a small group, is only a partial defense. You avoid liability for the tort, but still pay for any damages. Public necessity, protecting the public at large, is a complete defense with no damage liability. We've got great examples in our Listen and Learn episode that covers this topic. So what makes intentional torts different from negligence? 3 big things. 1, intent versus accident. Intentional torts require purposeful action. 2, available defenses. Different defenses apply to intentional versus negligent acts. And 3, damages. Some intentional torts allow for recovery with only minimal harm, while negligence requires actual damages. Here's your attack plan for analyzing intentional tort questions on an exam. 1, identify the specific torts at issue. Is there physical contact? Consider battery. Is there fear of contact? Consider assault. Is there confinement? Consider false imprisonment. Is there entry onto land? Consider trespass to land. Is there interference with personal property? Consider trespass to chattels or conversion. Is there harm to reputation? Consider defamation. Then analyze each element carefully. Focus on intent. What exactly did the defendant intend? Look for transferred intent possibilities. And check for actual damage where required. Then consider all potential defenses. Was there consent? Was there justification like self-defense or necessity? And for defamation, was the statement true? Let's try a quick hypo. Dan is angry with Paula and swings a baseball bat at her head. He misses Paula, but hits and breaks Vince's expensive vase that was sitting on a nearby table. What intentional torts might be present? So let's break it down. Assault against Paula? Yes, Dan intended to create reasonable fear of harmful contact. Battery against Paula? No actual contact occurred. Battery against the vase? Well, no, the vase isn't a person. Trespass to chattels or conversion regarding Vince's vase? Yes, through transferred intent. Dan's intent to commit battery against Paula transfers to the property tort against Vince's vase. Damages? Well, substantial harm to the vase suggests conversion rather than trespass to chattels. Remember, on the exam, the facts often suggest multiple torts from a single incident. Don't just spot the obvious one and move on. Think about all possible legal theories. For deeper dives into these topics, check out our Listen and Learn series episodes on assault and battery, defamation, false imprisonment, and property-based intentional torts. Each episode walks through real bar exam questions with detailed analysis, and all are linked to in the show notes. In the next episode, we'll explore strict liability and vicarious liability, situations where defendants can be liable regardless of fault or for someone else's actions. We'll cover products liability, respondeat superior, and defenses like assumption of risk. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to give us a like, leave us a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes.